Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
There were like 2,000 kids dancing their heads off. And there was one little girl when I played a song that she just was folding her arms and wasn't impressed and was just staring at me. And I couldn't quit thinking about that one little girl because I wanted everybody to be having a good time. So there, there's 1,999 other kids losing their marbles. And there's this one little girl judging me. And I'm like, oh, little Katie is not happy. Oh my gosh, I must be the worst DJ ever. But I think that taught me the value that you're not going to make everybody happy. Not everybody's going to love your stuff. And that's okay. Like, I am not everybody's cup of tea, but I am definitely a lot of people's shot of bourbon, and I'm okay with that.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. Join your hosts, Billy and Brian, a couple of average dudes who will serve as your armchair life coaches as we share our life experiences, both the good and the bad, in an effort to help us all better understand how we can enjoy and make the most of the life we have left to live in a more meaningful way. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with us through the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy. Brian is currently in a business meeting, so he will join us whenever he has time. Today, we have Rich Bracken. Rich is a global keynote speaker, media personality, and award-winning sales and marketing executive. Rich routinely works with companies, firms, and individuals across the country looking to establish sustainable change and improvement in their approach to achieving their business and cultural goals. Rich is a frequent speaker and writer on topics such as emotional intelligence, leadership, goal setting and achievement, sales, client service, and presentation skills. Over the last few years, he has been featured through such media channels as Fox News, CBS News, Vice, Reader's Digest, Thrive Global, and has worked with such global organizations as MDRT, Meeting Professionals International, and the Legal Marketing Association. He's here today to talk about how he uses his experience as a DJ who has traveled the globe delivering block rockin' beats to help others further develop their emotional intelligence. Welcome to the show, Rich Bracken.
Thank you, sir. That was a mouthful. I'm always, every time I hear it, I'm like, I got to cut a lot of that crap out. And I appreciate the Chemical Brothers drop in there too. Don't think for 1 second I'm going to let that slide. That was impressive.
Absolutely. So you're my kind of people because I knew you would appreciate that. And we were talking off air and I asked you, what kind of DJ are you? Are you dropping beats at clubs? Or are you a Terminator X type DJ? And we wanted no part of Terminator X because he's just too epic.
Oh, Terminator X is one of the first DJs I ever learned of. Him and Jam Master Jay were the first two DJs I was ever aware that what a DJ was. So when comparing to them, there's literally no way. But yeah, I loved I was a nationally touring. I played over in England for a little while, but played mostly house music clubs and festivals and stuff like that too. So yeah, it's making me miss it a little bit just talking about it.
Public Enemy is what turned the corner for me musically. Like, I think when we talk about four corners, Public Enemy is one of my four corners. Absolutely. Like, I remember hearing the song Prophets of Rage, and it played right before the Damon Wayans HBO special, The Last Stand. And I had that on VCR, and I just would rewind the song all the time and just listen to the song all the time. I'm like, I want every tape because that's what it was back then. I wanted every PE tape that I could get my hands on. So
so you'll appreciate the fact that so Public Enemy was one of mine, as like Public Enemy and Arrested Development and some other groups. X-Clan were big. I was a big heavy metal hip hop kid starting in middle school on. So you'll appreciate the fact that Public Enemy was like a big part of my life for as long as I can remember. And so when was it? Maybe like 3 years ago, I'm one of those people that like, you'll probably flip me off in traffic at some point because I'm usually like singing in my car or putting on some sort of a performance. And every now and then I'll put my phone up on the dash and record it just because I want to entertain. Like that's my job in life, to entertain. I've got my phone up and I'm recording me doing Bring the Noise. Not the Anthrax version, which I love the Anthrax version, but it was the original PE version. And so I tweeted it out and I said, one of those days that I just had to bring the noise on the way home. and I tagged Chuck D in it. Well, Chuck D, so I get home, see my wife and kids and everything else. And then, we put the kids to bed and I grab my phone and like my Twitter notifications have erupted. And I was like, what in the world is going on? Chuck D responded to the tweet, retweeted it, and then started following me. And I still have the screenshot. Yeah. I mean, like done from a fanboy's, like I lost my mind, man. So I screenshotted the retweet. His retweet, the only thing that said it up top was, whoa. I was like, yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is
awesome.
Fantastic. So we always ask people what 10 roles they play outside of entertainer. What are some roles that you play in your life?
Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats, but the ones that are probably most important to me and the ones that I talk about the most are son, husband, father, friend, keynote speaker, positivity consultant, which is what a lot of my friends call me, just their consultant on how to be more positive. I'm a music fan, DJ, MC, and then weight loss success story. So those are the 10 hats that I usually wear the most.
And we're actually going to talk about the weight loss success story here at the end of the episode today. But let's start here. You have husband and dad as roles that you're most looking forward to in the second half of life. What is it that you're looking forward to in the second half of life when it comes to being a husband and a dad?
Yeah, my family is the beginning and the end of my world. And I've got two sons that are just the most fantastic, hilarious, brilliant, sweet kids I've ever known. I'm biased, but at the same time, they're just awesome kids. And so I'm excited to see what they wind up doing with their lives. It's always that if you could look at a crystal ball to see what they're going to do later in life, I'd be curious to see. But they're just so full of potential and so full of life and creativity that I'm just excited to kind of just be there to cheer them on for the rest of my life. That's what I'm most looking forward to, is just seeing what happens. It's like reading a really good book, or, watching a really good show. Like what happens next? What happens in the next episode? Like it's the best Netflix binge I'll ever have.
And how about in terms of being a husband?
Yeah, I think it's just the partnership that we have, just to make sure that we're supporting our boys and making sure that we're having fun with them. And my wife is very supportive of me as a business person and me as an individual. And so it's just I'm very thankful for the fact that, she puts up with most of what I do and who I am. But I'm also excited for that second part of life where she gets to cash in that, like, get into heaven free in the express lane pass for dealing with me. So no, I think it's just, those are the most important relationships in my life. And I'm just excited to see how things evolve.
Well, you grew up in Memphis and Kansas City, so I feel like the trade-off is that now you're experiencing Minnesota winters.
Oh my God. So yeah, I will say, being born in Memphis, I was born with Southern skin. So it's very thin. All of this brown fat crap, that are like, oh, just if you live here for a couple of years, all of a sudden you get this brown fat and then it's not as cold anymore. And I'm like, you know what? Brown, hell no. I don't want to deal with brown fat. I don't think so.
I've lived here for 44 years and I've never heard this term brown.
So it's
fat.
A lie.
Yes, this is clearly, because I've never heard this term of brown fat. And I will tell you now that you never get used to it unless you're somebody who likes being out in the cold. I know people who love being out in the cold. I know people who like being out in their fish houses. I think people who have fish houses have ulterior motives because they're trying to get away from their wives.
I think people that ice fish have ulterior needs, is what they like. They need to have their heads checked. Like, that to me is, no offense to any people that ice fish that listen to this podcast. I will say, as a Memphis born, Kansas City raised guy, that has to be the dumbest sport I've ever seen in my entire life, if you want to even call it a sport. Like, the concept of putting a house on a frozen lake and turning on a heater and drilling a hole in the ice. Are you joking me? Like, what? That to me, like, I refuse to wrap my head around it. And I guarantee you somebody will send me an email like, oh, you got to try it. It's a lot of fun. I'm like, no. There are certain things in my life that will never happen. That's one of them.
Rich Bracken, positivity consultant, keynote speaker,
fancy ice fisher. I will say that I am true to my brand, man. I'm an authentic dude. And that's one thing. I will positively say thank you. I will be polite about it, and I will positively say no.
uh, so what are you looking forward to in terms of being a keynote speaker in the second half of life?
I will say that I've been really working on my craft for the last 5-6 years, really building my brand, doing a lot of work, building my keynotes and building my notoriety. I mean, I liken the speaker industry to the way the DJ industry was when technology got really slick and easy. So I started DJing back in like the days of vinyl and, bringing in CDs before streaming started and anything digital. But once the technology got cheap and everybody was buying up, laptops and different digital mixers and things like that, all of a sudden everybody wanted to be a DJ. There was even a song called that. So the speaking world is the same way now that everybody's got digital platforms and social media and everything else. And, they've got an opinion about something and they want to be a speaker, which is great. Like, I applaud that. If you have a voice, if you have a story, I'm all about that. But it's a competitive industry. So I think what I'm really looking forward to now is that here I am at we'll call it year 5.5. My brand over the last couple of years has really erupted. And it's now at a point where, I have one of the best agents I could ever ask for. And she's really taking things to another level. And we've got some things lined up that are just, had you told me this 3 years ago, what I'm about to go do, like I would have said, thank you for the insight. You're probably an ice fisher too, because you're crazy for saying that. But I hope that you're correct. I'm very lucky to do what I do, and it's gotten to a point now where I'm speaking to audiences that have been having set goals to speak in front of, but I'm having opportunities now like I never would have dreamed of.
Well, let's do this. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk to Rich about this idea of emotional intelligence and how he uses his experiences as a DJ to share that story. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
The Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast. You know that family whose house you hung out in when you were a kid? The house was a little loud and chaotic, but always fun, and sometimes felt more home than home. Well, that's us.
We're the Wilsons, and we welcome you into our podcast with silly chat, ridiculous games, and interviews with interesting people.
Like a spin doctor. The Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast.
Welcome home.
Hello, everyone. This is Brendan from the Unchefed podcast. Each week on Unchefed, we unpack a topic regarding the politics and history of our plates in the hope of becoming better eaters. That's Unchefed, available now on your preferred podcast network.
Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps us on our quest to reach the top of the podcast charts. Finally, since you can't make a mixtape for your friends and loved ones like you used to do, share this podcast with them instead. We hope our experiences resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, let's take a minute to be present with our breath. If you're listening somewhere safe and quiet, close your eyes and slowly inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do that one more time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and open your eyes. You feel better? We certainly hope so. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Brian is taking care of business right now, so I am here with Rich Bracken. You can check him out at www.richbracken.com. You can follow him on Instagram at richbracken1. You can also follow him on Twitter. He's also got a podcast called Enrich Your Soul. You can check that out. Rich, you've been a DJ in the past, and in one of your podcast episodes, you've got a funny story about your first ever wedding DJing gig. So what lessons did you take away from that experience?
So many. I think we may need another episode for this one. So the story goes that I was a DJ in college. That's where I started DJing in high school. I was living in Memphis at the time in college, and I was DJing, and I had an agent that was booking me on different gigs. And I told him, under no uncertain circumstances do I ever want to DJ a wedding. No way, no how, not happening, no. And he said, well, okay, I'll make note of that. So time goes by, and all of a sudden he calls me one day and he goes, hey, I know you don't want to do a wedding, but I really need a favor. This guy's called in. He can't do this wedding later on today. Can you cover for him? I was like, sure, fine. So I wind up taking the gig, and I go. And for those of you that are not familiar with an old fashioned shotgun wedding in the South, it's basically when there is, we'll call it a connection prior to marriage that brings about another life. That the parents. Sometimes begrudgingly make the two lovebirds get married, whether they like it or not. So here I go. I'm setting up for this wedding. We'll just say the reception's supposed to start at 6 p.m. And so I'm getting set up thinking I have all this time. Well, people start showing up at about 5:40. And I'm thinking I have like another 20 minutes to get set up. And people may show up at 6. They may kind of trickle in after that. So people start showing up about 20 minutes early. And I had no idea at this point what the background was of this couple. Photographer walks up and says, hey, nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. Hey, by the way, do you know the story? And I said, oh, there's a story? Okay, no, I don't know the story. And he goes, well, long story short, girl gets knocked up. Parents are furious. They're both like Baptists, Southern Baptists. They're forcing the couple to get married. So like there's a lot of animosity. This is, whatever you could do to smooth things out and make things chill.
No pressure.
Right. No pressure at all. I don't want to be there in the first freaking place. Normally when people come into a wedding reception, like there's joy, there's, people feel the love or whatever. It was like a damn funeral. People were walking in, like putting jackets on the back of their chairs and grabbing like shots of Jack. It was bad. So in walks the bride and the groom, and nobody is smiling. Nobody like this. I mean, imagine a room of about 150 people. Nobody is smiling, barely any conversation. It's just bad. It's just tense. And so the wedding reception starts. The bride walks up. She's visibly pregnant. And she said, can we just do the father-daughter dance and get this over with? I was like, sure. Now, keep in mind, this thing was supposed to start at 6. It's like 6:15 at this point. So we're 15 minutes into the official time of the reception. So I started playing the father-daughter dance. I do the DJ, like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the father and daughter, for their first dance. And so they're doing that. And of course, I have CD. So I lean down to get a CD. And we're in a glass atrium building, probably about 3 stories tall. And I'll never forget this noise as long as I live. I lean down to get the CD for the next song, and all I hear is, you dirty effing bitch. And I'm like, what? And I stand up, and the groom is like pointing over so he's being held back, pointing his finger over his guy's shoulder, like screaming at the mother of the bride. We're in a glass building. Like this thing is echoing. And so at that point, everybody's like, all right, let's go get, and everybody grabs their jackets and leaves. The entire thing, the entire reception lasted 20 minutes. So lesson number 1, set boundaries. And when I say set boundaries, I mean, like I should have stayed my boundary with my agent and said, no, I don't want to do another wedding or do a wedding. Number 2, always be ready for God knows what. And 3, make sure that you are really prepared for the most awkward scenarios. So me being me, the icing on the cake, and of course I was like 22 when I did, or like 21 when I did this. Imagine there's a screaming match going on. The groom is calling the mother of the bride every name in the book. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, what do? I played Kung Fu Fighting. I'm not kidding you. So they're like, people are like seriously like hitting all the exits trying to get out of this room. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, because I didn't know what to do. I'm like, what do you do in a situation like this? So I played Kung Fu Fighting, and like one guy walks by and goes, thumbs up, good job, good call. But yeah, it was a train wreck that you just know is going to happen, and you just can't do anything to stop it. And so you're just kind of like brace for it, and then it happens. But, it really taught me the value of being able to be empathetic, but also it was just one of those out of control things. I didn't know what to do.
That's interesting because it brings up this first question I had for you, because on your podcast, you have an episode where you broke down all the lessons being a DJ taught you, and we don't need to go through them all, and we'll link that episode in the show notes. But one of them is read the room.
Yeah.
So talk about the importance of being able to read a room in social and business settings, and how did that help you choose Kung Fu fighting in that moment?
I think at that point, the wedding party itself, the core of the wedding party was beyond help. Like there was nothing I could do for them. That would have been like putting my foot in a hornet's nest. Like, no, thank you. And I think at that moment, I was trying to break the ice, whether it broke or it was broken for me. But at the same time, like I at least wanted to make one person that was exiting the most awkward reception that they had ever been to. I wanted to give them something funny to be like. I just imagined in my head as people were filing out, and that one guy gave me the thumbs up. I'm like, that dude is going to work on Monday, and he's going to say, "You'll never guess what happened." He's telling the story at the reception. He's going, but the best part was that the DJ played Kung Fu Fighting. Like, somebody is probably guesting on a podcast like this week that they're saying, you know what? I remember this time that I went to a wedding reception in Memphis, and man, there was a knockdown drag out in the wedding party, but the DJ played Kung Fu Fighting. And that to me, ladies and gentlemen, was emotional intelligence.
Oh, that is fantastic. When you're up speaking, what does reading the room look like to you, and how do you respond to the stonewall face?
I compare the room reading as a speaker to the room reading as a DJ, in that you have to be aware of what's going on. And I think the one thing that made me successful as a DJ is the fact that it wasn't about me. Like, I never made it my show. It was me entertaining people, me giving people an escape, giving people hope and just relaxation from everything that was going on. Like, people came to my club and my festivals and my shows to forget their problems. And so when I speak, it's the same thing. Like, I'm not the celebrity up there. I'm just the person that's up there telling stories and getting people to laugh but giving them hope and helping them be empowered at the end of the session that they can go be better versions of themselves. And I share my own humility in those stories, like things that I personally have been through, or people that I know that are close to me that don't mind me sharing their stories. I think in any audience, and I can think of one guy in specific that I presented to a group in Hawaii not too long ago. And there was one guy in the room that just wasn't having it. He was just like, he would have rather been 100 other places. The thing I think about when I think about that, because I also tied a story in another presentation where when I was DJing at a kids festival, there were like 2,000 kids dancing their heads off. And there was one little girl when I played a song that she just was folding her arms and wasn't impressed and was just staring at me. And I couldn't quit thinking about that one little girl, because I wanted everybody to be having a good time. So there's 1,999 other kids losing their marbles, and there's this one little girl judging me, and I'm like, oh, little Katie is not happy. Oh my gosh, I must be the worst DJ ever. But I think that taught me the value that you're not going to make everybody happy. Not everybody's going to love your stuff, and that's okay. Like, I am not everybody's cup of tea, but I am definitely a lot of people's shot of bourbon, and I'm okay with that. And I think it's the same thing with DJing, speaking, business meetings, proposal meetings, sales meetings. Like, you're not going to just blow everybody away. When you see people like that, I'll lock in on them for a little bit and see if I can't change their face a little bit or change their mood, or if I can break something down, that's fine. But if I can't, then I move on. A lot of people get fixated on that one person. And like I said, I've done that in the past in my DJ world. But at the same time, it's distracting to you serving the rest of the audience. So engage, try to do something about it. But if you can't, move on. It's okay.
And one of your keynote presentations is actually a dance party where you incorporate your DJ talents and experience into your presentation. I imagine that would be a lot of fun to be at that presentation. How does that presentation help others tune in and turn up the volume on their emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's the presentation's called Tune In, and what it helps to do and understand, and kind of give a little bit of the background on emotional intelligence. It's really, emotional intelligence is how you manage your emotions and your responses to things, but then also how are you interacting with other people? How are you letting stimulus get to you? How are you being triggered negatively or positively? And so with emotional intelligence, I mean, we're bombarded with stimulus all day long. any stimulus. It could be an email, a text message, a social media post, a sound, something. I used to be triggered by a meeting that I had to go to, and it was 24 hours ahead of the meeting that I had every single week. But just seeing that meeting on my calendar was a trigger for me. And so when I talk about those things and I engage in the idea that emotional intelligence can send your day in any direction within a matter of 2-3 seconds, so can music. And so if people can be triggered negatively by something within 3 seconds, why couldn't they be triggered positively in the same 3 seconds? So what I talk with people about in this presentation is that you're going to have these stimulus. You're not going to be oblivious to bad moods or sadness or frustration. But when you have those things, if you recognize the fact that you are being triggered negatively within a matter of a couple of seconds, you can also say, okay, I'm not going to think this. Or if you need to intentionally add something into your day or have some sort of a buffer after that you can activate, then all the better. And I tell people too, like, I will listen to music throughout my entire day, and it helps me regulate my emotions. It helps me get focused at times. And if I'm in meetings and something triggers me, I won't put a song on. So I'm not like on Zoom, all of a sudden just flip on my Spotify, to hell with everybody. But what I can do is I can hear a song in my head, and I know within the first 3 notes of that song, I'm in a good mood. So if I'm hearing it in my head, it regulates my own emotions. And so with the presentation, I have a sampling machine that I bring up, and I play the first couple seconds of a song. You play that intro to Jump Around by House of Pain. Everybody knows what that is. You don't even have to hear the actual major part of the song to know what it is. Same thing with a lot of songs. Within the first 3 seconds, we hear a song, we're like, oh, and as a DJ, I would see that. I would be up in the booth and I would play a song and see people visibly respond to something because you played a song and it was a song that they wanted to hear. It was like the most popular dance song at the time, and they would just rush to the dance floor. Why is that? Because they had the stimulus of the song and they responded to that trigger. So it's really, how are you using that time and how are you regulating your own emotions? And I use music all the time as a regulator for myself.
That brings up an interesting behavior change that I think I personally need to make. I was reading this, I believe it was in Jay Shetty's book, which is Think Like a Monk. If you haven't read Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty, all of you out there, it's a must read. You need to read it. And I think he talks about, instead of using an alarm clock or what have you, or to wake yourself up, choose a song that puts you immediately in a good mood. And I used to choose one of 2 songs. I would either choose songs that kind of worked into a crescendo, so they started off quiet because I wanted that nice, calm, waking up process. Or I would choose songs that I liked, but I didn't love. They were kind of in between songs because they would just serve as a purpose to wake me up. And the reason why I never chose a song that I actually loved is because I didn't want to grow to hate that song, hearing it every morning when I didn't want to get out of bed. But
that's fair.
But I think now, as I look back on it and I reflect on what I've done in the past and maybe what I need to do moving forward, just connecting to what you said, I think I need to re-examine that relationship between how music makes me feel and how waking up makes me feel. I should feel the same enthusiasm waking up as I do when I hear a song that I love, because it's a new day with new opportunities. So I'd like that. Just in that moment right there, you kind of helped me reframe, because you're right. In those first 3 seconds, you hear those horns of Jump Around and you got a big smile on your face. Like, you can feel the energy hit you right there. Maybe Jump Around needs to be my wake up song.
It may be. I mean, and I know that any Wisconsin fans will relate to this. I know there's other teams that do this too, but if you go Google or go on YouTube and look up Wisconsin Jump Around, between the 3rd and 4th quarter of all the Wisconsin home games, they play Jump Around. There's 100,000 people in that stadium or something, 90,000 people. It's bonkers. Or, go look up Virginia Tech intro and they play the first 2 notes of Enter Sandman. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it. And it's almost like the old Name That Tune game show. You hear those first couple of notes, you're like, and it's just immediately triggered. But what I loved about what you just said too, is that it makes me think of the concept of the 2-4. I always call it the 2-4 theory. So things are either happening to you or for you. And so if you think about like, oh, I got to wake up because the day's got to happen to me. Well, you are also getting to see another day, and how many people wish they could say the same thing? So if you wake up with gratitude and you associate that song with gratitude of waking up to see another day, it's a whole different perspective. I have had the same song on my alarm for, God, I don't even know how long, like 10 years, and it never gets old. But it reminds me every single day that I have the opportunity to have another however many hours within my day to make a difference, to do something for myself, to bring joy to my life and the lives of others. And so it's a reminder of the positivity of waking up, not the, oh crap, I got to get up and work again.
Well, I'm listening to the audiobook of The Power of Habit, and they talk about habit is created by cues, routines, and rewards. And I think just examining that cue of what wakes me up. Right now I'm unemployed, so the only thing that wakes me up is my internal clock telling me to wake up, that sort of thing. But if I have to go back to waking up with an alarm clock, I think would be in my best interest to choose a song that fires me up, that gets me going throughout the day. So I like that. You're pretty smart for a DJ, and those guys just, they just push buttons, right, Rich? That's all they do is they just push buttons and bounce around the stage and tell people to pump their fists. So
a lot of them do, and a lot of them seriously are not much smarter than the music that they download. So that's very true too.
Well, then I imagine there are similar assumptions with regards to being a speaker, and that you're just sharing empty platitudes that generalize complex situations. So tell us about the nuances of being a DJ and how those nuances helped you develop a growth mindset that you use to help businesses with their leadership and employee engagement.
The one thing that I prided myself on when I was a DJ that translates into my speaking roles as well is the back end research and the planning. And while I will say that I have never said, like, here is the set that I am playing tonight, I am playing just these songs, I've never done that, because I feel like once you do that, if something goes sideways or God forbid the crowd doesn't respond to one of the songs on your list, but you've kind of going down that path, mentally you're going to be anxious. So I think the ability, and I will also say as an aside, I took an improv class a long time ago. If you've not taken an improv class, it's one of the best things you will ever do for yourself from a personal standpoint, from a business standpoint. But it helped me understand that nothing is so big that you can't recover from. And there is no curveball so strong in life that you can't hit at some point. And so with my sets as a DJ, I would go in knowing that I wanted to set a certain mood, but I studied my music so much that I knew it backwards and forwards. I gave the example during my last tune-in presentation where I would know the song so well that I could be sitting there having a conversation in the DJ booth with you, and subconsciously or in my peripheral, I'm hearing the song, and I know based off of the cues within the song how much time I have left in the song. So if you and I are engaged in conversation, I may say, hey, can you hold that thought for 1 second? I know that I've got 45 seconds to transition the song. I know exactly what song I'm playing next. I know exactly where to cue it up. I know exactly where to introduce it. I would introduce it, transition songs, go into the next thing, be done with the song that was just playing, and turn back and go, okay, I'm sorry, what were you saying? And but I wouldn't miss a beat because it was all the work that I put in, the studying, just memorizing the songs. And I'm the same way with my presentations and how I tell businesses too, like, have a plan, have a goal, have something you want to convey, but don't be so rigid in your thought that you can't shift a little bit when need be. I mean, God knows in the last few years, businesses and people have had to shift all over the place. I mean, we've not seen anything like this in our generation's lifetime. And, here we are coming out of the backside of it, but a lot of people didn't know how to improv in their life. A lot of people didn't know how to say, hey, look, I still have the same goal. It's like kind of like, what is the app Waze? That, like, you'll tell it where you want to go, but it may say, hey, look, traffic's gotten bad on this route. Why don't you go this route instead? It still gets you to where you want to get to. So your goal, your end point's still the same. The route's just a little bit different. With my presentations, I will say, like, hey, I'm not a big, like, the people that put 1,000 bullets on a slide, please God help me. I am very much like most of my slides have just big pictures and like 2 words on them. And I convey a thought, but it allows me to also, kind of bringing back in, read the room. It helps me understand what's working, what's not. Is this crowd more of a jokes crowd, a storytelling crowd, a serious crowd, a motivational crowd? I can pivot anywhere in those slides because I'm not bound by the words on the slide or not bound by the bullet points on the slide. I can do whatever I want, but I know my content backwards and forwards. I know my message backward and forward. I know the goal of what I want people to feel backwards and forwards. So how we start and where we get to are going to be the same, but what we do in the middle is going to be a little bit different depending on the audience.
Leading up to a presentation, do you take requests from the company so that you can get a vibe of what that crowd is going to be like?
100%. I always have a pre-planned call with the client and just say like, hey, what is your goal for this meeting? What do you want people to take away? What is this? Who is this audience? Who's going to be in the room? What are they experiencing right now in their life? What is going on in the company? Is there anything going on in the future that I need to know about? And then I do some research on my own. I research the company. I check out their LinkedIn. I check out their website, check out their social media, and I look for cues and things like that. But I think it's absolutely critical. Anybody that goes in and says, well, I have my presentation and I'm going to deliver my content, and it's the same thing every single time, like, seriously, you're not going to last very long in the speaking industry. Because if you're not there to serve the client, you're missing out. I had a good friend of mine the other day that told me a story that was one of the greatest perspective setters, especially when it comes to being a speaker, because she's a big, very well-known speaker. She said she was talking to a colleague one time and something came up about speakers that have egos or speakers that kind of act holier than thou. And the guy told her, he said, at the end of the day, we're just coffee. And she goes, what do you mean? And he goes, when you do an event, when you go speak at an event, no matter what your fee is, chances are the client is spending more money on coffee than they are on you. So at the end of the day, coffee is more important than you. So don't go in there thinking that you're God's gift, because that little paper cup is holding more gold prospectively and from a cost standpoint than what you're bringing. So don't think that you're the most important thing in the room. Can you imagine getting up and giving a speech at 9 o'clock in the morning to a room full of people that did not get coffee? No, thanks. I wouldn't do it. I'd go to Starbucks for them. I'd buy them all coffee. I don't care how many people are in the room. I'm not getting up in front of a group of people that haven't been caffeinated. Are you kidding me? But it's all about, to me, it's always been about the client. It's always been about the audience. It's always been about the experience. You're there to serve them. You're there to provide them some sort of an experience or an escape. That's your job. It's not your job to get up there and say, hey, look at me, and I'm the coolest thing in the entire world. And I've seen people try that and they crash and burn horribly.
How does all that translate then to just an everyday life and how you approach interacting with normal people or everyday people, not even your colleagues, not your employees, not your associates, anything like that?
It's a great question. And I think what I realized many years ago, was that this life of mine, I was put on this earth to help people, to serve people, to support people. That's my gift. That's my ability. I have a lot of unique talents that allow me to do that. Kind of sound like Liam Neeson, like I have a specific set of skills. But I realized a long time ago that when you give it and you serve and you help and you support, and even if you just offer help and nobody takes you up on it, the act of offer, number one, it triggers chemicals in your brain that you're actually experiencing joy. So offering to help and offering to support brings you joy in the first place. And then if you are able to deliver, you're providing joy for yourself and the individual that you're affecting. And therefore you're just producing more positivity. So people that are like, I've never understood people that are just whimsically rude or whimsically aggressive or, just hateful for no reason. Like, I'm sure it's born of something, but I couldn't imagine living a life like that. And so I think when you come in contact with people, like I'm the person that opens doors for people, I'm the person that pays it forward in the coffee line, I'm that person that I want to surround myself with as much joy as possible. And if I have something to do with it, I'm absolutely going to have some sort of a say in it.
I think the way you frame that in terms of serving is so important. A lot of times I go back to the what here is we're doing this podcast. Why are we doing this podcast? And we're doing this podcast to help people navigate the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. And we're not monetizing it at all at this point. Someday we'd like to get to that point. You and I talked about how you are a 6-year overnight success, and we're hoping that this podcast becomes a 6-year overnight success just in less time than that. But even just sitting down here and having this conversation with you, I'm getting something out of it. And trust me, everyone who listens to this show knows that there is a selfish element to this. that I am having conversations with people that I want to have conversations with because I think they provide value to me, but in turn, broadcasting it out for everybody so that they get something out of it too. I guess that's sort of my maybe backhanded gift to people to be able to say, hey, I think this person has some valuable insight. I want to share their insight with the world as well too. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, Rich is going to talk about how he has shifted here during the pandemic, and then he's also going to share his weight loss journey with us. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
Have you ever had a bad day at work?
Well, the Fuck My Work Life podcast is perfect for you.
Hosts Jay and Kay share listeners' entertaining stories from the workplace, which may have you thinking you don't have it so bad after all.
Find Fuck My Work Life on your favorite podcast platform.
The Cult-Worthy Podcast. Your host, Antonio Palacios, will guide you week by week through a bevy of cult favorites, obscure cinema, and hidden gems. Listen to us on your favorite platforms or follow us on thecultworthy.com. The Cult-Worthy Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to help get you over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Oh, and don't forget to show yourself some love every now and then too. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here with positivity consultant and keynote speaker of emotional intelligence, Rich Bracken. You can find him at www.richbracken.com. You can follow him on Instagram at richbracken1. He's on Twitter. You can check our show notes for all of his details. So, Rich, I imagine that the pandemic, as terrible as it sounds, might have been a godsend for you in some way, shape, or form, because then you were able to present remotely, but then also considering the dire straits that a lot of companies are facing in terms of just their employees' mental health and navigating emotional intelligence, that has been an important message for you to share with them. And you just talked about service. So can you talk about how the pandemic has shifted your messaging, has shifted your scope of presenting as well?
Yeah, I think, the last several years of the pandemic, which it feels like almost like dog years, where it's like, 7 years to 1 year, while there were a lot of bad things, and I can't call myself a positivity consultant if I'm not somebody who looks for the silver lining, right? I try to figure out ways that not use it to my advantage, because that's the wrong way of phrasing it, but really find ways that I could keep myself on the straight and narrow, because I, like everybody else, struggled mightily during that time. What is going on, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of family health scares and things like that. So I think that as I look back on it, I think the virtual presentation capability was one of the best things to ever happen to my career, but it broadened my reach overnight. And what was interesting to me was that I had a conversation with a very well-known keynote speaker right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were just chatting. We got set up to talk through a mutual friend, and he made the comment of, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't deliver virtual presentations. Like, he just didn't want to do them and didn't feel comfortable doing them. And didn't, he was very much a dynamic on the stage speaker. In hindsight now, he did very well for himself. But I think while we all will roll our eyes at, oh God, another Zoom meeting or another, I don't want to be on Zoom any more than I have to. I also think it's one of the best things that's ever happened to us as a society too, because I think pre-pandemic, I don't know that I used Zoom or FaceTime all that much. And now it's a mainstay in my day, every single day. But it helps develop relationships with people that I don't normally get to see face to face. So what I will say is that, and you made a great point, that the timing of everything that happened, the ability to figure out, because that was the first thing I thought was, okay, what can I do in this time to figure out how to still get my message out, even though things are shut down? Like, even though we're like, it was at the point where none of us were leaving our houses. Nobody was doing anything. Everything was shut down. What now? And so I made some small investments in some technology. I got a new microphone, new camera, ring light, the typical things. And I just started, because I needed to, I just started putting out content and started talking on emotional intelligence, which even before the pandemic was a critical skill for people personally and professionally. But then ever since the pandemic hit has been even more critical. But it allowed me to speak. I spoke on several global webinars. I've got people in the same time zone as me, but then I'm talking to people that are up at midnight, 1:00 in the morning on the other side of the world, listening to me talk, which boggled my mind. But I think also it showed the necessity of a conversation like emotional intelligence. And so that to me was one of the biggest silver linings, if not the biggest silver linings of the pandemic, was really figuring out how to make that work and how to transition to the virtual speaking. I think there was a second part of the question. I just got so deep in that thought of memory. I think everybody needs to understand that there are elements that came out of the pandemic that aren't going to go away. Virtual presentations, virtual connection being one of them. So how do you maximize those changes? How do you maximize the alteration in a business? Not every change is, it may seem catastrophic or bad at the time, but if you can find a way to maximize it, it could be a big advantage for you. So, stop and explore those things, explore the things that are frustrating you and say, okay, what can I take away from this? What can I learn? How can I get better because of this?
What are you finding that businesses are saying to you in terms of, hey, Rich, we as a culture during this pandemic, when it comes to emotional intelligence, this is the biggest area of concern for us. This is our biggest area of growth that we need. Is there a similar response to that, or are they all over?
I think it starts from where the company culture is at the moment. And I think there are a lot of industries that obligatorily became interested in their employees' mental health. And I think because everybody was doing it, right? You didn't want to be the company that was like, well, screw your mental health. You need to get to work, or you need to be online at all times. Everybody kind of gave into it one way or the other. And now that things have gotten back to a new variety of normal, it will never be the new normal. But, you see a lot of industries and a lot of companies saying, well, okay, we'll get your butt back in the seats. We need everybody back in the office again. And, that's what I think also has created the great resignation of, what was it that I saw one day that somebody said, if your employees are resisting your back to work policy, probably a good time to take a hard look at how your culture was in the first place. But I think on the whole, I'll stick with the companies that truly had a genuine interest or developed a genuine interest in their employees' mental health because of their listening ability to their employee base. Companies are now saying like, hey, we really need to figure this out. We really understand the value of work-life balance is such an overplayed term, but really, how are we helping our employees be their best? And how are we giving them the resources to be at their best? And how are we engaging them and understanding and listening to what their needs are and meeting them where they are? And when they bring me in, the first thing I tell people is like, hey, look, I understand life is hard. Today, for the next 60 minutes, take a deep breath, because it's going to be okay. Wherever you are right now in your journey, wherever you are in your mentality, number one, it's okay to admit even internally that you fractured at some point, that you broke down at some point, that you fell short at some point. We all do. We all have, and we all will. And so that the humanity of everything came very much into focus for a lot of companies. And so the conversations I have with them are very empathetic, but very hopeful. Because I think a lot of people are still trying to figure this out and still trying to figure out what's next. And a lot of people are still suffering and struggling with things. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. But the focus now on mental health, especially in the workplace, is bigger than it's ever been. And I'm grateful because it allows me to talk with a lot of people that I probably would have never had the chance to talk to.
We asked Kristen Brown this too. Do you think that there's an emotional intelligence skill that is underrated? Kristen said they're all underrated, so you don't get to say that. But do you think that there's an emotional intelligence skill that is underrated, that is undervalued?
So it's funny because now I'm picturing myself in the Family Feud lightning round, and Kristen's already taken my answer, so I heard the buzzer in my head. Next answer. I think the one that's most underrated but is gaining momentum is truly the package of self-awareness. I think more and more people realized in the pandemic what their emotions truly were. Because I think before the pandemic, we were all just kind of chugging along, doing our thing, doing our work, doing the things, staying busy. Everybody was just kind of moving along. And then all of a sudden, we all ran into the same wall at the same time. And some people fell flat. Some people got knocked a little loopy. And then some people just hit the wall and figured out what they needed to do next. But I think the overall, I don't even know if this is a word, the overall okayness with not being okay has been the most prevalent thing. So I think the more conversations happen around that, it makes it less underrated. But I still think we have a long way to go as a society to say, hey, look, it's all right to be fractured. It's okay to have problems. Like I tell people all the time, I'm like, hey, look, because I ask questions of the audience when I interact with them, when I'm giving presentations, I'm like, has anybody ever, wanted to just say screw it and listen to The Cure? Nothing against The Cure, but you just want to roll up in a ball and not face the day. I have. I think too, and I have no shame in saying that, and it's all accurate. Like I share very real, very transparent, very vulnerable stories. And what's interesting to me is that I will get some people at the event that will engage me. I get a tremendous amount of emails after the fact, text messages after the fact, that say, thank you for sharing your experience. I thought I was alone. And even though on the predominant whole, like you hear more conversations about mental health, you have more conversations about self-awareness, to have somebody stand in front of you and say, have you broken down? Because I have. Because there's still a stigma with it. There's still that element of shame of like, oh yeah, I had a nervous breakdown the other night and I cried myself to sleep. Or I didn't want to get out of bed because it just sounded like the worst idea in the entire world because I didn't have the energy or the mentality around it. That's always carried this stigma of shame. And like, you just don't talk about it because you don't want to be that weak person. But now I think it's a mark of strength and a mark of vulnerability. And hey, you're human. Everybody's had those moments. So I think that's probably the most underrated of them all.
Well, one story that you share is your weight loss journey, and you've talked about the importance of having long-term goals broken up into short-term goals. So how did you use that approach during your weight loss journey, and how did you use short-term goals combined with long-term goals to get back on track when setbacks derailed you along the way?
So the weight loss story in the short version is that I was a heavier kid, started playing football in middle school, got bigger. I was 230 when I graduated high school. I was an inside linebacker and offensive guard, played 1 year of college, got up to about 250, I was playing a Division III school, transferred to Division I school, realized I wasn't as fast as I thought I was. And so I decided to walk away from football. And while I walked away from the workout habits, I kept the eating habits. And at that time, I didn't know how to eat healthy because I was always trying to get bigger. So I got up to about 260 and was miserable, just didn't have any energy, felt very insecure, just a lot of bad things. And so I had my diet analyzed. I was not eating healthy by any stretch of the imagination. So that was an easy conversation for my health instructor and I to have. Transferred some things and swapped some things and started walking a mile every night. And that was my goal. I started small. I wasn't, I didn't go out training for a marathon out of the gate. Like it was very much to get rid of carbonated drinks and get rid of fast food. Those were the first two things I had to do. It wasn't, we're going to completely revamp your life. We're going to completely change everything. It was walk a mile every night, don't eat fast food, and don't drink anything carbonated. Those are my three first goals. And I dropped 15 pounds, like almost overnight. It happened in a heartbeat. And so I think, it was at that level that I understood that there was progress to be made. Now, at the time, not so much as now, but there were a lot of like fad diets and pills and shakes and all kinds of stuff. And I know that there are a lot of them now, but I didn't want to do that because my mentality was if I rely on a shake to get me to a healthy weight and that shake company goes out of business, then what? And so I wanted to have the lessons. And to me, weight loss is all about health mathematics. Like if you're burning enough calories and regulating your intake and having portion control, like anybody can lose weight. But really it was all about getting to a point where I was achieving those small goals. I wanted to get down to 200 pounds. That was my big goal, but I was taking 5 pounds at a time. And I was like, okay, if I could dedicate this time and walk an extra half a mile a night. And so it was a mile and a half and it was 2 miles. And then I was jogging a mile and I was jogging a mile and a half. And it was progressive in nature, but I taught myself the lifestyle change. And that's what helped me lose the weight. And when I got to 200, I'm like, could I go lower? And it just became, I just felt better. I felt better about myself. I had more energy. I felt better about life. And, I got down to 160. The lowest I ever was 155. So, I lost 105 pounds, but now, I hover around the 100-pound weight loss line, and I've never felt better. But I taught myself those things, and I took the little goals to establish a new lifestyle, and I've kept it off for 24 years now. But it's the same thing with any goal. I think if you set those small goals, if you're in sales, don't worry about selling all of the people that you got to sell in the quarter. Set a weekly goal. Like, I want to close one account this week, or I want to develop 5 new leads this week, whatever that winds up being. Do the small ones, sell it, and celebrate those small wins. And once you start building that momentum, there's a million sayings about put one foot in front of the other and take one step at a time. If you apply that to your goals, while again going back and having the vision on the big goal, even if you have a small I'd much rather slip up and miss a goal that I have on week 3 and try to recoup it in week 4 than have one big goal that I get 6 weeks down the road and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not tracking to the level that I need to. What am I going to do now? I have a better handle on things as it progresses through the small goals and through the small timelines, that it allows me to be flexible. And if I'm up on a goal, then maybe you put the pedal to the metal and try to get it closed quicker than you normally would have had marked. So I think it's just a matter of keeping the balance there.
All of that reminds me too of when we talked to Scott Welly. We talked about the difference between discipline versus motivation. And I imagine on your weight loss journey, you probably hit plateaus from time to time, but I think it's discipline that pushes through those plateaus rather than motivation, because the discipline is already instilled deep within you. I imagine there are days when you don't feel motivated to work out, but because the discipline is so deeply rooted within you, you continue on. And that's the key to those small goals, is that if you keep doing them, they build up the discipline.
Yeah. And I will say with almost 100% confidence, I have never once been really excited that I was working out. As a standalone activity, I'm never like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go do another set of bench presses so that my chest feels horrible tomorrow. That's going to be awesome. I've never felt like that. But what I do know is that if I go and do this activity, or if I go for a run, or if I go do some ab workouts, or if I go do yoga, or if I go do these things, I know how my body's going to feel. And I know that that's the means to an end for me to have a better day, to have more energy, to be more motivated to do other things, to be able to play with my kids, So it's things that happen. So you're exactly right. There have been many a morning when I'm like, oh my God, like my alarm goes off, and whether or not I like the song is a whole different story. But my alarm goes off and I'm like, oh, I got to get up. It's 5. I got to get downstairs and work out. I'm disciplined to do that. I'm not going to say I'm perfect every single day, but also it's the motivation for me to want to be healthy like I am, to be in a position that I am, to feel the way I do. And the discipline, I think discipline and motivation go hand in hand, but I don't think you can't be motivated and successful without discipline instilled in what you're trying to do.
I wholeheartedly agree. Well, Rich, it's been a blast talking to you about music and about emotional intelligence. This was a lot of fun. This felt like a punk rock song where it just was really fast paced and you got a lot of information out of it just in a real short time. Like, we've been talking for an hour, but it really felt like 20 minutes right there. So that was a blast. Brian, I'm so sad that you missed this conversation.
Right. And so because Brian missed this conversation, we're going to have him do some sort of like a solo performance of we'll have to pick the song and he has to sing it and record it. And that'll be like a bonus episode because he missed out on this conversation.
Well, I did suggest that with your DJ skills, you could join Brian's Gen X Jukebox band, because I think if there was a DJ in there, that would take that band to a whole other level. Oh, it would just be fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Go down the list. And I'm trying to think of all the 90s bands that had DJs in them. I mean, you think about like Sugar Ray had one, Urban Dance Squad had one, Kid Rock had one. So, I mean, you got plenty of bands that leverage a DJ in their groups. Slipknot, one of my favorite bands, still has a DJ in their band. So, yeah, I think I got a place. So, I think because Brian missed out on this episode, I think I'm going to have to at least have him obligate at least one show where I get to show my talents.
I'll set that up for sure, because I'm already looking forward to that experience. Perfect. That sounds awesome. So, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. For Rich, for Brian, this is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the check mark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved.